Good morning, Bitcoiners. Hello, and welcome back to another edition of your Bitcoin Economic Calendar. I'm your host, Mauricio Di Bartolomeo, co-founder and chief strategy officer here at Ledn. And as always, we bring you the news and analysis you need to start the week off right in Bitcoin. You'll notice that I have a different setup today, and that's because we're traveling currently at the C100 conference here in San Francisco, but we'll be back at our usual setup as of next week. It's been a wild week in the markets so far. We've seen Bitcoin break below $30,000 and recover slightly since. There's been a lot of chatter about the Luna Foundation Guard, as well as the stablecoin UST losing its peg, how that's impacted the markets. We're going to cover that in the blog part of today's economic calendar, but in the video section, we're going to focus in the Bitcoin part of the equation. We did see Bitcoin reach that Michael Saylor support line, and we're going to talk a little bit about that and what else we are seeing in the Bitcoin futures and options markets. So it's going to be a great one. So starting as we usually do with Bitcoin, we see that price dropped quite significantly yesterday, down 11.59%, breaking, reaching that $30,000, basically reaching the $30,700 MicroStrategy support line, slicing right through it and bouncing back. It essentially touched $30,015 yesterday, and it broke well below the $30,000 mark earlier in early hours of this morning's trade session. It did have a nice healthy bounce earlier in the day, but it has since essentially lost some of that steam. What we are seeing essentially right now is it's holding above that average purchase price of Michael Saylor, and that is interesting because that is something that we had been following and tracking, and it's something that we kind of wanted to illustrate here because quite timely yesterday with the price dip, Nayib Bukele and the government of El Salvador announced that they had bought the dip, and almost poetically, their average purchase price for this transaction was $30,000, $744. So just $44 away from Michael Saylor's purchase price at MicroStrategies. Interestingly, we did see, as this often happens in Bitcoin, when it moves this fast, this quickly, the sentiment has essentially gone deeply into the fear territory. We see that it's still holding quite, at almost record levels in terms of extreme fear here. However, this is being seen as a buying opportunity for many opportunistic investors, again, as we highlighted, and some of these are disclosed pretty promptly, but we may see more announcements come out recently as the dust settles and people kind of are able to potentially announce some of their transactions more calmly. Looking elsewhere in the crypto markets, we can see that the perpetual swap funding rates, and this is an indication of where leverage traders typically are positioning themselves. We see that the funding rates are still positive, which means that there are more longs than shorts at the moment, which is a healthy sign. We do see, however, that the annualized 1 month basis on the CME futures contract has now gone into the negatives, which means that on average, you can sell a futures contract for a price that is lower than spot price to the tune of almost 1%. The same is true for the 3 months. Sorry, 1 second. The 3 month actually has not broken below the negatives, but it's basically just above 1%. It did reach less than 1% earlier in the week. So the fact that that the leverage traders are not necessarily piling on into a short position signals in some ways that there's not that many leverage investors or speculators looking for further downside. That's consistent with what we're seeing in the short interest, and this is as per Bitfinex. It's relatively high given to where it's been earlier in the year, but it's still not anywhere near levels where they were earlier in the year. So this can be seen as a healthy sign for Bitcoin in the sense that there's not people essentially piling on and taking on short positions at these levels. One, a couple of more things that we wanted to highlight is that um, there's a lot of conversation around, how low can asset prices go, and this is being true in both equity markets and Bitcoin as well. But one thing that we wanted to bring up or highlight is that some long-term investors with conviction are making moves. And this is what we wanted to highlight here with this announcement from Mr. Warren Buffett at Berkshire Hathaway. Now, while he is not a fan of Bitcoin, Mr. Buffett is known as one of the world's, if not the world's best investor for a reason. And that is that he patiently waits for opportunities and he does not chase markets. Now, for what it's worth, Mr. Buffett has deployed over $50 billion in capital over the last quarter, and we are yet to see how much more he has deployed or he will be deploying over the second quarter. And to wrap up this section, we wanted to remind the viewers and readers of this publication that there's more to Bitcoin than just price. And for instance, we can see, and let me just pull up this chart. So as I was mentioning, for instance, here we can see that in this chart, we see the number of addresses on the Bitcoin network that are basically non-zero balances, and that is the green line, showing that there is over 42 million addresses with a non-zero balance on the Bitcoin network right now. And down here on the red line, we see addresses with a balance above 0.01 Bitcoin. Again, this is on-chain balances. So again, almost 10 million addresses with more than 0.01 Bitcoin, and over 42 million addresses with the non-zero balances on the network. And the trends speak for themselves. They have not slowed down, and they're showing no signs of doing so. So again, fundamentally speaking, there are still a lot of healthy signs to the Bitcoin network, and essentially, again, the recent turmoil in the markets can present buying opportunities to those with long-term conviction. And that's it for this week's show. Thank you everybody for watching, and make sure to check out Ledn.io, where you can earn the best interest rate on your Bitcoin and your USDC, up to 5.25% on your first 0.1 Bitcoin, and 2% APY on balances above that, and up to 7.5% APY on your USDC. We do have the best rates for dollar loans backed by Bitcoin if you need liquidity and don't want to sell your stack. And make sure to check out our Bitcoin mortgage product. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and see you next week.